My wife said, "You don't know what poverty feels like." After I caught her giving our money to her parents who just bought a BMW, so I dug deeper into their finances. What I discovered about her poor childhood destroyed everything she believed about her family. Okay, so this happened, and I am still trying to wrap my head around it. I have been married to my wife Rachel for 4 years, and I thought I knew everything about her, apparently. I was completely wrong. Here is the thing, Rachel grew up believing she was poor. Like, really poor. She would tell me stories about wearing hand-me-downs, working long hours at 16 to help the family survive. Parents always stressed about bills. Her parents, Diane and Carl, always talked about struggling financially. Unpaid bills, you know the drill. As someone who also grew up without much, I completely understood why Rachel felt obligated to help them out. But here is where it gets weird. 2 weeks ago, I noticed $800 missing from our joint savings account. When I asked Rachel about it, she got defensive and eventually admitted she had been sending money to her parents for groceries and bills. Look, I am not heartless. If her parents were truly struggling, I would want to help too. So I said, okay, but maybe we should set a budget for family assistance. That is when she exploded. You grew up with money. You don't know what poverty feels like. I stared at her. Because here is the thing. Reddit, I grew up in a trailer park. My dad worked 2 jobs. My mom cleaned houses. We ate ramen for dinner more nights than I can count. But you know what my parents never did? They never took money from their kids. They scraped and saved so I could have school supplies, so I could go to college. That is what poor parents who love their children actually do. But I didn't say that. I just let it go. As an engineer, I am used to spotting patterns and inconsistencies. Over our marriage, I had noticed little things that didn't add up about her parents' situation. They would complain about money but then mention expensive purchases in passing. I had dismissed it as maybe they are just managing their money differently, or maybe they prioritize different things. You know how you rationalize things when you don't want to rock the boat? Then yesterday happened. I am at Rachel's parents' house for Sunday dinner, and Carl is complaining about how they cannot afford to fix their car. Diane is nodding along, talking about choosing between groceries and medicine. The whole sob story. I am feeling guilty for even questioning the $800. And then I kid you not, Carl gets a phone call and starts bragging to whoever's on the line about their upcoming cruise to the Caribbean. In the same breath, while still claiming they cannot afford car repairs. I looked at Rachel, waiting for her to say something, anything. She just sat there. Like this was completely normal. That night, I couldn't sleep. My engineering brain kept running calculations. If you can afford a cruise, you can afford car repairs. If you can afford a cruise, why do you need your daughter's grocery money? The numbers just weren't adding up, and I couldn't ignore the pattern anymore. Last week, I started paying attention to their social media. Really paying attention. Diane posting about her new Coach purse, Carl's BMW, and yes, I checked the registration. It is a 2024 model, bought brand new 6 months ago. Their house, it is bigger than ours, and we are both engineers with good salaries. But here is the part that is eating me alive. Rachel still believes they are poor. Still believes she had a difficult childhood. Still sends them money every month because she feels guilty for having a stable life when they are struggling. I tried talking to her about the contradictions. She said I was being judgmental, and that just because they bought a few nice things doesn't mean they are not struggling overall. She actually said that. About a BMW and a cruise. The BMW was my final straw. You don't buy a $50,000 plus car when you are asking your daughter for grocery money. Something was seriously wrong here, and I needed to know what. So Reddit, what do I do here? How do I tell my wife that her parents aren't poor? They are just really good at spending other people's money. And more importantly, what else don't I know about her childhood? Because I am starting to think there is a lot more to this story. Edit. A few people are asking about her brother Kyle. He is 30, lives at home, never held a steady job. Rachel's mentioned he has always been taken care of by their parents, which seemed weird even to me. Wife sends money to her poor parents, who just bought a BMW and are planning a cruise. When I questioned it, she said I don't understand poverty. As an engineer, The numbers don't add up, and I am starting to think she is the one who doesn't understand what really happened to her childhood. Update 1. So, remember how I said the patterns weren't adding up? Well, I decided to dig deeper, and what I found has turned Rachel's entire understanding of her childhood upside down. After reading your comments, I started investigating systematically. Over the past month, I have been tracking their social media posts, looking at public records, and piecing together a timeline that makes my stomach turn. First, I looked up property records. Carl and Diane's house bought in 2019, the same year Rachel started working double shifts at 17 to help keep the family afloat. The down payment was $60,000, cash. Then I found the inheritance records through public probate documents. Carl's father died in 2018 and left him $180,000. Diane's grandmother passed in late 2018, leaving her $95,000. That is $275,000 in inheritance money flowing into their accounts right before Rachel's heaviest work period. But here is where it gets sick. I tracked Rachel's work history through her old social media posts. She started working at 16, but the intense hours 25-30 per week started in 2019. Right after they got the inheritance money, not before, when they would have actually needed help. Kyle let something slip last weekend that made everything click. We were all at dinner, and Rachel mentioned how exhausting it was working so much in high school. Kyle and I am not sure if this was calculated or genuine confusion said, "Wait, but wasn't that when Mom and Dad got all that money from Grandpa Joe and Great-Grandma Rose? I remember them talking about what to do with it." The table went dead silent. Carl and Diane looked like they had been caught stealing. Rachel just stared at Kyle like he had slapped her. I excused myself to use the bathroom, but really I went to see if I could find any documentation in their house. Their home office door was open, and there was a desk with some papers visible. I saw what looked like bank statements. And I took a quick photo with my phone. I know. But I was desperate for answers. What I saw made me sick. Bank deposits from inheritance funds in early 2019, followed by monthly deposits labeled Rachel, family contribution starting that same spring. Her money wasn't keeping them afloat. It was funding their upgrade to upper middle class lifestyle. Over the following weeks, I used our shared Netflix account. They used Rachel's login and noticed they had been watching financial planning shows. I checked their Amazon account history again. They used Rachel's Prime and found orders for luxury items going back to 2019, thousands of dollars in purchases made while Rachel was working herself to exhaustion. But the smoking gun came when I accessed old bank statements through our shared family phone plan. Okay, this sounds invasive, but they added us to their family plan to save money, and I have access to account management. I found transfers from Rachel's checking account to their personal spending account, not their bills account, their personal spending account. There were receipts and statements showing a pattern: Rachel's $600, 800 monthly contributions going directly to fund their wants, not their needs. A $3,000 dining room set purchased the same month Rachel started working overtime. A $5,000 vacation to Hawaii, funded by her spring break earnings. The worst part, I found Rachel's college financial aid paperwork in our own files. She had claimed her family couldn't help with tuition, qualifying for need-based aid. Meanwhile, her parents had just received $275,000 in inheritance and were using her wages to buy luxury items. Rachel worked 2 jobs through college, believing her parents couldn't afford to help her. They could have paid her entire tuition and still had money left over. When I showed Rachel the inheritance timeline and some of the bank records, she went quiet for a long time. Then she started crying, but they said the money was for keeping us housed for groceries. I had to tell her the truth. They used her guilt and work ethic to maintain a lifestyle they had already paid for with inheritance money. She wasn't helping a struggling family, she was being exploited to fund their luxury spending while they kept the inheritance as their safety net. She didn't believe me at first, called it circumstantial, and said I was trying to turn her against her family. But then she started asking the right questions, started remembering things differently. Like how Kyle never worked but always had new clothes. How her parents always had money for their wants but claimed poverty when she needed anything. How she had been conditioned to feel guilty for wanting basic things because the family was struggling. She has been processing this for 2 weeks now. Just trying to reframe 16 years of lies. We have a family dinner this Sunday, Rachel says. She wants to confront them directly about the inheritance money and timeline. I am terrified about what is going to happen. Update. Some people asked about the legal implications. We actually consulted with a lawyer this week about the financial aid fraud. Apparently, using inherited money to claim poverty for federal aid while having your child fund luxury purchases could have serious consequences. We are documenting everything. Update 2. I am still processing what went down at that family dinner. Rachel had spent 2 weeks preparing, organizing all the evidence we had gathered, and she went in with a plan. She had been going through old photos, old documents, anything she could find from her childhood. The more she looked, the clearer the pattern became. She found her old report cards, straight A's, but no family celebration photos, because money was too tight for dinner out. She found college acceptance letters to schools she never applied to because we cannot afford the application fees. She found a Christmas list from when she was 17, asking for a used laptop for schoolwork. She never got it. But that was the same month. Carl bought himself a $2,000 golf club set. By Sunday, Rachel was a different person. Calm, prepared, with this steel in her voice I had never heard before. The dinner started with their usual routine. Carl and Diane complaining about money being tight, bills piling up. They even mentioned that their cruise got more expensive, and could we help with the cost? That is when Rachel spoke up. Before we talk about money, I have some questions about the timeline of our family finances. She pulled out a folder organized like the engineer she is with bank records, inheritance documents, and a timeline she had created. Dad, I want to understand the inheritance you received in 2018, the $180,000 from Grandpa Joe, and Mom, the $95,000 from Great-Grandma Rose. Carl's face went white. I don't know what you mean, honey. Really? Rachel's voice was completely calm. Because I have the probate records and I have the bank deposits, and I have the timeline of when I started working 30 hours a week. She laid it all out like a presentation. The inheritance money arriving in early 2019, Rachel's increased work hours starting immediately after, the luxury purchases funded by her wages while the inheritance money sat untouched. Diane tried to deflect. Sweetie, that money was for emergencies. We used your help to manage day-to-day expenses. No, Rachel said, pulling out bank statements. You used my help to buy a hot tub, a dining room set, and a vacation to Hawaii. The inheritance money is still sitting in your savings account. That is when Kyle spoke up. And I realized his comment weeks ago hadn't been innocent at all. I have been wondering about this too. You guys got all that money, but Rachel was still working constantly. I always thought it was weird, but I was afraid to ask. Carl exploded. You don't understand adult finances. That money was our security. Your security. Rachel's voice got quiet and dangerous. While I worked 30 hours a week, gave you every paycheck, and ate ramen in college because I thought we couldn't afford my tuition. She pulled out the financial aid documents. I claimed poverty for federal aid. You let me commit fraud because you wanted to keep your inheritance money while spending mine. Diane started crying, saying they did their best, that Rachel was so responsible and they knew she could handle it. You mean you knew I wouldn't fight back when you stole from me? The word stole detonated like a bomb. Carl started yelling about disrespect and ingratitude, but Rachel just sat there completely calm and delivered the final blow. I spent my entire childhood believing we were poor. I wore secondhand clothes while you bought designer purses with my money. I worked myself to exhaustion while Kyle played video games. I took out student loans while you had $275,000 sitting in the bank. And now you want me to pay for your cruise? She stood up, closed her folder, and said, I am done. With the money, with the guilt trips, with the lies you want to live like you are wealthy, do it with your own money for once. Carl completely lost it, screaming about how we were destroying the family, how Rachel was being brainwashed by me, how she owed them everything. That is when I finally spoke up. She doesn't owe you anything. If anything, you owe her about $50,000 in wages you stole, plus interest. We left with Carl still screaming and Diane sobbing. The aftermath has been intense. Diane calls every day, crying and guilt-tripping. Kyle called to say he is moving out and getting a job at 30. He has finally realized what his parents really are. We have blocked Carl's number after he left increasingly unhinged voicemails. Rachel's been in therapy working through what she calls financial parentification and systematic emotional abuse. The therapist confirmed what we suspected: this was calculated exploitation, not parental struggle. We have cut them off completely. No more money, no more guilt trips, no more contact until they acknowledge what they did. And you know what? Rachel seems lighter every day. She has started talking about things she wants to do, places she wants to go, things she never felt allowed to want before. Edit. For those asking about legal action, we are building a case with our lawyer. The financial aid fraud alone could have serious federal implications, and there may be options for recovering some of the money they essentially stole from Rachel during her teenage years. Final update: I wasn't going to post another update, but something happened that brings this whole nightmare full circle and shows just how calculating Rachel's parents really were. Kyle called yesterday. Since moving out last month, he has been doing his own investigation into the family finances. What he found, it is worse than we thought. He discovered that after Rachel moved out for college, Carl and Diane's lifestyle didn't change at all. They just found other income sources. Diane suddenly got a part-time job, something she had claimed she couldn't do while Rachel was funding their lifestyle due to health issues. Carl started doing freelance consulting work that he had always been qualified for but never needed while he had Rachel's wages. They had been perfectly capable of supporting their luxury lifestyle all along. But here is the part that made me physically sick. Kyle found emails between his parents from 2019 discussing financial strategies. Not budget planning strategies for maintaining their upgraded lifestyle after the inheritance money. In one email, Carl wrote, "Rachel's so guilt-driven about money, we should be able to count on her contributions for at least another few years, even after she graduates." Diane replied, "As long as we are careful about how we frame it. She cannot know about the inheritance money. We should probably start talking about helping Kyle with rent soon to justify the expenses." They were strategizing how to financially manipulate their own daughter while planning to use the same tactics on Kyle. Kyle also found something else in their documents: applications for energy assistance and food programs from 2020-2021. They were claiming poverty for government aid while sitting on inheritance money and Rachel's contributions. When Kyle showed me the emails, I had to sit down. Rachel just stared at them for a long time, then said quietly, "They planned this. All of it. But you know what? Reddit." She was wrong about one thing. Because over the past few months, I have watched my wife transform into someone incredible. The woman who used to apologize for buying herself coffee now talks about taking art classes. The woman who felt guilty for wanting new clothes just bought herself a beautiful dress because she wanted it. She is still angry, she is still in therapy, but she is also free. We bought a house 3 weeks ago. A beautiful house that we can actually afford because we are not funding someone else's luxury lifestyle. Rachel keeps walking through our home office, saying, "This is where I will do my pottery, and this is where we will put the reading chairs." Future tense, plans that are ours. Kyle's thriving too. At 30, he has got his first real job and his own apartment. He tells Rachel almost daily how sorry he is for the years of differential treatment, but she is helping him understand that he was manipulated too, just differently. As for Carl and Diane, radio silence since Kyle confronted them with the emails. No more guilt trip calls. No more sob stories. I think they finally realized their game was over when their own son turned against them. Our lawyer says we have a strong case for both the financial aid fraud and potential civil recovery. We haven't decided if we will pursue it. Rachel's focusing on healing rather than revenge right now. Rachel started calling it what it really was: systematic financial abuse with premeditation. Her therapist says the hardest part for victims is accepting that the manipulation was deliberate, not desperate. Last night, Rachel was planning our first real vacation, something we can afford now that our money stays in our accounts. She looked up from her laptop and said something that perfectly captures her growth. "I used to think being a good daughter meant sacrificing myself for their happiness. Now I know being a good person means protecting myself from people who would exploit my love." Carl and Diane spent years teaching Rachel that her worth was measured by her willingness to give. But they were wrong about her worth, and they were wrong about her strength. She deserves parents who protect her dreams instead of funding their luxuries with them. She deserves to buy herself something nice without calculating how it might affect someone else's budget. She deserves a life where her generosity is a choice, not an obligation extracted through guilt and lies. And most of all, she deserves to understand what real family support looks like. People who build you up instead of people who hollow you out to fill themselves. We are planning our vacation now. Our first trip that is about celebration, not obligation. A toast to freedom, truth. And finally, understanding the difference between family and people who happen to share your DNA. To everyone who shared similar stories, Rachel has been reading your comments, and they have helped her realize she is not alone. For anyone still dealing with family members who see you as a resource rather than a person, you deserve better. Your money, your choices, your life. True wealth isn't measured by how much you can give away to people who demand it. It is measured by how much you can protect for the people who truly deserve it. And Rachel, she has finally learned she deserves it too.